Hello and welcome to the Practical Color Grading series. In this series we will use colorfinale to work through color correction and grading problems that both beginner and advanced users experience. We will begin with the most critical problem. How can you be sure that the skin tones in your videos are rendered correctly? And if they aren't, how can they be fixed? An observer always notices something is wrong when primary colors aren't rendered correctly. We find primary colors in the blue sky, the green grass, and the skin color of a person. When the skin color is wrong, the whole video feels wrong. So it's very important that the color of skin looks natural. But how can you fix it when it doesn't? Today, we will show you how to fix skin colors in the simplest and fastest way, using techniques that are available to colorfinale users. Before we start this tutorial, there's one thing you need to do if your material is shot in RAW or log. In either of these cases, you will need to convert your footage to a video color space, such as Rec. 709, so that the video scopes work as expected. Make a habit of remembering the color space of your footage, or if you're color correcting someone else's, ask the client. It is much easier to achieve a good result grading in the original video's color space, although grading in log might offer better flexibility. We'll be covering grading in log in future tutorials. Also, working with skin tones is easier if you use soft light and ensure that white balance is properly set in camera, or by using a grey card or color checker so that you can easily fix it in post-production. With all that out of the way, let's get to work correcting skin colors so they are rendered correctly using Final Cut Pro and the colorfinale plugin. We will be adjusting the three main parameters: luma, saturation and hue. In what follows, we will analyze a few examples and see how to set these parameters correctly. Here is a source filmed in log, but let's suppose we don't know anything about the camera and the color space used for this video. In cases such as these, we load colorfinale in the Final Cut Pro inspector and use its color management tool. Clicking show and selecting assume log for color profile gives us an excellent image, even if we don't know what color space the camera operator was using. Now we need to adjust the brightness of the image. In order to do this precisely and correctly, we'll start by opening the luma scope. To do this, we will launch the video scopes panel in the viewer. Click the view drop-down above the viewer and select video scopes, or use the Command 7 keyboard shortcut. One or several scopes will appear, depending on your monitor size. If you don't have a large monitor, open a single scope so that it is clearly visible. For now, we click the tiny scope icon in the upper right corner to open the luma scope. We'll select waveform, luma and IRE units, heritage from the analog broadcast standards. IRE shows the brightness of a video image from 0 to 100 IRE units, where, in Rec. 709, 100 represents the whites in the video and 0 the blacks. If some of the waveform falls below 0, it means those areas are super blacks and likely will be clipped. If they are above the 100 mark, these areas are called super whites and might get clipped as well. Right now, we see the exposure of the entire image, but we are only interested in the brightness of the skin areas. In order to only display the brightness values of the skin, we use colorfinale's image analysis tool. We open it in the inspector and select the mask type we want from the isolate drop-down list. This can be a rectangle, ellipse, or a horizontal line. To match the shape of the face, an ellipse works well. In the viewer, we now see an oval mask that we can tweak. We need to select a small skin area. We could make the mask larger, but it's important to avoid the hair, eyes and lips, since they all differ in brightness from other skin. Now the LumaScope only reflects the brightness of the skin. Its range is between 35 to 64 units. It's been established experimentally that in soft sunlight the correct brightness value for skin should be between 40 to 70, with 40 being shadows and 70 the highlights. It's important, of course, to take the atmospheric conditions and artistic decisions into account. In night shots or in high-key scenes, the brightness and saturation of skin tones will be very different. Right now, the brightness is just below 70 and 40, so we can increase it in colorfinale. Using exposure, we slightly increase the brightness of the whole image so that the shadows stay in the region of 40 units, and the brighter areas approach 70. Let's have a look at the result. Now that we have defined the image exposure, let's correct brightness and hue. For this, we will use a different scope, the vector scope. The vector scope is a color wheel that shows primary colors: red, green, blue, yellow, cyan, and magenta. The more there is of a particular color in the image frame, and the more that color is saturated, the greater the deviation is from the center of the scope towards this color. Having selected a specific area, in our case a skin area, we can determine its tone and saturation. From the vector scope settings, we can turn on the skin tone indicator if it hasn't been already. By default, it is turned on. This is a vector that corresponds to the ideal skin tone. If the skin tone falls in line with this vector, we can be sure that the skin color is correct. And at this point, many people wonder what they should do with different skin colors. Some of us have more golden skin, some have darker, and some have lighter skin. The fact is that skin always has the same tone and brightness, only its saturation differs. The saturation of golden skin that's common to people from Asia is usually quite high and can reach halfway to the edge of the scope. Dark skin rarely exceeds 45% saturation, and light skin, as found in Caucasians, is the least saturated and in most cases does not exceed 30%, except when it's been adjusted to match an artistic taste. As we can see on the scope, the skin is barely saturated, so let's increase the saturation. Now we can see on the scope that the saturation has increased a little bit, and the tone almost ideally fits the skin tone vector. Let's now use one of the easiest techniques to correct the skin tone. We go over to the layers and add a color wheels layer. Now we can add more saturation to the highlights and midtones, as the skin color is situated mainly in this tonal area. We are adjusting the mid-range and lighter parts of the image to get as close to the skin tone vector as possible. In the end, the scope shows an ideal fit to the skin tone. Let's take a look at the result. Let's take another example. This video is also shot in log, so let's use colorfinale again. We go to color management and select assume log. Now the video is in the usual Rec 709 color space, and what we notice is how bright the scene is in this video. There are many bright regions in the background. Let's take a look at the waveform in the Luma scope. The brightness of the overall image ranges from 10 to 92 units. Now let's select an area of the skin again. To do that, from the image analysis section, we select the ellipse and set up the mask to include only skin tones, avoiding the hair and the eyes. The scope now shows that the brightness of the skin is significantly below the range of 40 to 70 units. But it's not good practice to raise the exposure much, because if we do, details in the background will start disappearing. Let's turn off the mask and see how the change affects the whole image. Since the video is shot in high key, the brightest tones exceed 100 units. They become fully white and all information in these parts is lost. Because of this, we will only increase the brightness of the skin by a small amount. Let's select the skin again, reset the exposure value and just raise it a little bit by 0.4 steps. This will be enough, since the bright areas of the skin are approaching 70 units and the shadows 40. Let's now take a look at the skin tone and saturation by opening the vector scope. We find that the saturation is too low and the tone of the skin is slightly different from the skin tone vector. Let's increase the saturation levels. We add a little bit less than before, as the skin is darker and not golden, so this amount of saturation will be enough. Now we need to adjust the skin color a little bit. Again, we'll use the grading tools, open the layers panel and select color wheels. We will adjust the color value of the highlights and mid-range areas. We'll try adjusting the highlights first, but as you can see, if we drag the gain control until the skin looks right, the white background shifts towards magenta. Because the image is so bright, if we don't want to change the video's color values too much, we can work on the midtones instead of the highlights, like this. Let's disable the mask and look at the result. As you can see, adjusting the color values of the midtones in such a bright video has more effect on the skin but less on the background. Having said that, it's obvious the highlights are biased towards magenta just a little bit. In order to fine-tune the skin more and to keep the background white, we can also use another tool, the Hue, Saturation and Luma Curves tool. Let's select the skin again, turn off the color wheels and select the HSL curves. In the first tab, Hue versus Hue, we'll use the color picker to capture the skin color on the HSL curve. Now on our scope we have 3 points. The center point is the color we have just picked and the 2 points on the sides capture neighboring colors. We can move the center point to get the desired skin color. But as skin covers a wider range of colors than we have just selected, we really should also add yellow and magenta. To do this, we hold down the command and left click with the mouse to add additional points. And now we have in our selection a range that's wide enough to make sure that we have captured all of the skin color. Let's fix the points on the curve. Holding down Option, we delete any redundant points. Now we can align the skin tone to the skin tone vector a bit more accurately. Let's view the result and compare it to the one we got with the color wheels. Using the HSL curves is a little bit more complicated, but it gives a more accurate result. With their help, we could correct the skin tone without affecting the colors in the background too much. Let's take another example. This video was also shot in log, so we can use colorfinale again. But this time we know for certain which color space it was shot in. This video was shot in S-Log2. So we open up the color management section, go to color profile and select use aces. We choose S-Log2 as the input color space and Reg 709 as the output. Now, even without scopes, it is clear that this image is too bright. Often, when filming with S-Log2 or S-Log3, the operator deliberately increases the exposure in order to avoid noise in the shadows. Let's open up the Luma scope and see what it looks like. Okay, nothing exceeds the 100 units mark. But the image is too bright, so we must reduce the exposure. We'll select a frame with the most skin visible. Select Image Analysis and then Ellipse. Now that we have selected the skin, we can see that it is still too bright. To lower the exposure, we once again open the layers, choose the color wheels and slightly decrease the brightness of the midtones. Now the midtones have decreased to 40 units. And the highlights are around 70. Let's now take a look at the saturation and hue with the vector scope. We can see that there is not enough saturation and that the color goes off slightly into an unwanted direction towards red. Let's add some saturation, but only a little bit. Because the skin is light, it needs to remain light. At this point, we'll add some color to the highlights so that the tone matches the skin tone vector. Let's disable the mask and see the before and after. The skin tone is on the vector, but if we zoom in, we will see that the face has a tinge of red that seems to cover but blends in with the actual skin tone. This unfortunately sometimes happens when shooting an S-Log2. Let's try to adjust the skin tone in such a way that makes this shade of red less prominent. So we again head to the layers and use the HSL Curves tool. Opening the Hue versus Hue tab, we'll use the color picker and select the color we want to get rid of. Now our selection is represented on the curve. We'll click on a point in the center and drag it up so that the transition is less noticeable, but we must take care not to turn the skin green. If this isn't enough, we can go to the Hue versus Saturation tab and again, with the help of the color picker, select the color which we want to make less prominent. Here we lower the middle point to reduce the saturation of the red. And now the transition into the red has become less noticeable. Let's have a look at the before and after. With this technique, you can get rid of any undesirable colors. We have shown how it's possible to get the desired skin tones without resorting to more complicated tools. In most cases, basic tools are sufficient for this purpose. The layout and functionality of colorfinale allows you to do this quickly and conveniently, but if the shooting conditions are more complicated, you may need to use slightly more advanced colorfinale tools for working with color. For example, masks. We will talk in detail about such tools in future videos. Tell us in the comments which topics interest you most, and if you have any remaining questions about this video, please let us know. See you in the next video.